si los hongos se comunican con nosotros y nosotros no somos capaces de poder entender lo que ellos nos enuncian, no es porque los hongos no se puedan comunicar, sino que habla de nuestra incapacidad de poder comunicarnos con ellos. Entonces me pregunto, ¿qué nos quieren decir los hongos? ¿Qué nos quieren decir?
Just thinking about this idea of the magic of like finding a mushroom. It's so brief that you can miss it. And I remember seeing a veiled lady mushroom. Do you know that one that has la que tiene la reta al costado? And I just went crazy because it was right there. So this idea of intersection of time and space, that you are right there, seems fitting for the mycelium, for the network. The mycelium or the network had always been there.
There's nothing that you can read and make you learn or know more than if you really spend time with mushrooms. When I started working with mushrooms, it shaped somehow the way I connect with myself also, in another way, completely different.
Did you talk about control? And I think a mushroom is so difficult control. I don't think that you can control this body. You have to learn how to dealing with them. And this is also for my life, because we try to control our life with our decision, and there are another condition, another thing that you can't control. You trust, you learn how to be with them.
We talk about how we understand time, what we can learn from nature's times. Time is an invented structure that somehow determines everything else based on production and based on, of course, like capitalism and imperialism of time. So there's this idea that we have to follow it blindly. More than just slowing down, it's really understanding that time sort of stretches out.
You kind of end up unlearning from that and realizing that it's much, much simpler, like slowing down, doing less, but doing it better, working on building relationships and strengthening bonds with people rather than just like producing and producing.
The reason of being is el buen vivir. The reason of being, el buen conocer. Reconnecting the communication of our birth. Cada una tiene que vivir su dolor. You have to live your own pain.
If you go back to nature, like it's almost kind of just going back to very basic processes that you need to unlearn things. Colonialism, patriarchy, extractivism, capitalism. In Latin America, we work with so little resources that you learn to get really, really creative. And you realize that capitalism is not gonna work for you if you want to survive.
I love talking about like spore dispersion strategies. The spores can be everywhere.
People are also good dispersers. People love to see that.
I love talking about like spore dispersion strategies.
We have this one fungus that only lives in Tierra del Fuego and in Tasmania.
This ancient connection, Gondwana land.
One of the ways in which they are called in Tierra del Fuego is pan del indio. It's one of those ancestral vestiges of that connection.
We're all connected. It would be very sad for the overall, lucha, for the movements to not understand that we're all connected.
¿Cómo se siente el sol en tu piel?
What is memory? What is an archive? What is preservation in a place where things don't last?
DNA kind of remains forever, and this concept of natural heritage and the prohibition of natural heritage can also, and the not giving access to nature can also it's also problematic in a way. A natural heritage that is so important for the cultural identity.
That it's not, just like brown or white. It is, and it's not only, like adoring Pachamama or adoring Jesus. It's like really much more, like mixed and complex, and it is not at the same time. So the continuation of knowledge had to be able to adapt in order to survive.
fungi is that. It's like this non-dualistic way of looking. Los hongos están como un poco entre medio, siento, y vienen como a destruir esta noción tan armada de vida-muerte. They show us another way of relating.
The ways in which we study organisms is very much related to how we value them socially and commercially. The fact that rust fungi are pathogens on a variety of plants and very valuable plants, they are studied by people who are funded, by scientists who receive funding from agricultural industry. And there's so many other really cool groups of fungi that are not well studied because they simply don't have, they're not, kind of ironically made into an enemy. And it's like their enemy status that has brought funding upon them so that they can be eradicated.
The Museo del Hongo was born in Chile that was to bring justice to the fungi, justicia para los hongos. And in that search for justice for the fungi came all this reclaiming of connotations, creation of words, asking for language to be used in the correct way. So that's really sort of the genesis. It's like a movement that reclaims justice for the fungi.
Well, there's no regeneration if there isn't any degeneration. Fungi do that. We've got to let things rot.
Los honguitos son agentes de regeneración. Desde ahí viene nuestro pasado, nuestro presente y el futuro. Los hongos tienen muchos poderes y pueden transformarlo todo.
Hello everyone, my name is Jasmine Ostendorf-Rodríguez. I am a writer and curator, born in Amsterdam, based in Mexico City. I wear many different hats in many different projects, but some of you might know me either from my book, which is called Let's Become Fungal, Mycelium Teachings in the Arts, or as the founder and director of the Green Art Lab Alliance, which is an alliance of 60 organizations in Latin America, Asia, Europe, and the Caribbean, all arts organizations working with environmental issues. And also one of the resources of this alliance is the Future Materials Bank, about which my successor, Giulia Bellinetti, will speak a bit more about too. So I would like to give a little bit of context around this question of the rise of artists working with environmental issues. And I mean, to me, it comes as no surprise. We live in very worrying times. The biggest challenge for humanity, the climate collapse, is not even at our doorstep. It's already impacting many people all over the world, whether that's in the form of drought or loss of biodiversity, or in the form of flooding, or in the form of losses of your crops and therefore impacting the availability of food, or in the form of ocean acidification. It takes many different forms. Extreme weather, it's never been this hot in Taipei, I think. It's been like 43 degrees the last few days, which is quite shocking. I mean, I could keep on going with this list of examples, from oil spills to microplastics. It's all very, very concerning, and basically toxicity is all around us. And this is the reality that we are in, and it's impossible to deny this. And because it's so impossible to deny this, of course, also artists are picking up on this. Artists understand what's happening in society and are engaging with these different topics in different ways, which is very important, because if you ask me, the only way to even imagine a possible future and to think about alternatives, we need imagination, we need resourcefulness, we need creativity, we need experiment, and these are all qualities that are key to an artistic practice. So I don't want to put all the pressure on the artist saying you have to save the world, or you can save the world, or have this very unrealistic expectation. But I do think these qualities are extremely important to start thinking about these alternative systems and alternative ways of living. Maybe it's interesting to say a little bit about the background of my work, and also how that relates to materials. As some of you might know me from Let's Become Fungal, Mycelium Teachings in the Arts, I became very interested in mycelium as not just as a material, well, initially as a material, because it is a very, let's say, promising material for our future because of its incredible properties. It's being very lightweight. It's something that you can grow yourself. It's something that you can use different substrates for that are often, forms of agricultural waste streams that you can then grow into mycelium using the right spores for that. But also it's biodegradable. You can use it in a lot of different contexts. So I've been interested in mycelium as a material for a long time. That I think also led to thinking about networks and alliances, essentially, because mycelium, for those who are not familiar with this material or this term, it's the underground system of the fungus. So it's a communication system. It's a system of exchange. So nutrients are exchanged between different mushrooms, but also other species, so like plants and trees. So also this notion of interspecies exchange I find very, very interesting. And it's a decentralized network, essentially. No, there is no center, which where all the nutrients go, or where, if you make the parallel to our human society, where all the capital goes. No, so there's no accumulation of the resources in one place, but rather it's a decentralization of these resources. And that in itself suggests, if you allow me that freedom to think about it in this very open way, but suggests an alternative to also capitalism, which is essentially about accumulating wealth, accumulating capital in one place rather than being so decentralized. So as I was working more, first of all, with mycelium as a material, as a sustainable material, it started to unfold itself as actually a storyteller, as a way of starting to think about different systems and about different methodologies. So this is how I became interested in the idea of exploring mycelium as a methodology to collaborate, to have mutually beneficial exchange, to be decentralized, to have more symbiosis. And so essentially, mycelium is also a model for this alliance that I set up now 12 years ago in 2012, called the Green Art Lab Alliance, in which essentially there's no center. It's all these different nodes in the world. There's all these different art centers part of it. Doesn't have an office. It's very organic. It's very informal. But it's all about these relationships of solidarity, relationships of care, of exchange, and starting to think about exchange also and resources in a non-monetary way. When we think about the art world, or when we think about support, we often relate it to money. We say, oh, we need resources, it means we need money. Or we need support, it means we need money. And so I see mycelium also as an interesting exercise to rethink the idea of resources as money, but to actually think, oh, what else could that be? What kind of other nutrition, or what other kind of information or communication could that be? And so with these 60 partners, we are a support network exchanging non-monetary resources that often take the shape of knowledge. So how can we help each other understanding what are the environmental challenges in different parts of the world, or another example, indeed, like what alternatives are there to toxic materials? How can you make them yourself? I mean, this is like a key thing also in the Future Materials Bank is transparency, sharing recipes. So it's not about putting a patent on your material and saying, this is mine, and now I'm going to make money with it. Again, like the ideology of capitalism. But rather saying, okay, I have used natural materials. I created this recipe. What about sharing it with other people so other people can learn from that and can make their own variations? This is actually quite radical in the system that we are in, that is, only thinking about profit, essentially. So from material to methodology to system design, and really taking mycelium as a system, as an alternative system, I find extremely interesting. And this is also very much the premise of my book. So to say maybe a little bit of context about that, it consists of 12 teachings, 12 questions and teachings inspired by the world of fungi. So looking at mushrooms, mycelium, spores, slime molds, and based on conversations with, I don't know, maybe I did more than 40 interviews with all female mycologists, artist curators, mostly across Latin America and the Caribbean. We distilled these 12 teachings. So maybe to give an example is like how to organize like mycelium, how to collaborate cross-border, cross-discipline. What are the challenges that you face, and how do you overcome them? So it's very much based on these experiences with different partners in the Alliance, understanding how they organize themselves in movements, in solidarity movements, in activist movements, in agrarian reform movements, so with farmers, for instance. So this is, for me, very, very inspirational, how it can start with a material, let's say, to understanding what the teachings are of this material, and translating that all the way to giving us alternatives for ways of living and for imagining the future. There is endless interesting examples. In the bank, there is already more than 400 materials. Something that recently I became very interested in started with a hike in the forest. So I was with one of the partners in the south of Chile, and it was part of our Gala Fest, which is an annual gathering of artists working with environmental issues and different organizations. And we spent some time in the forest, basically, and we found some wood, decaying wood, on the forest floor that was completely blue. And I was like, oh, wow, I think I know what this is. Is this the blue elf cup? Because it looks just like a bright colored wood, but it's actually a mushroom that has colonized the wood. So it looks like a piece of wood that if you pour like ink over it, it's really bright. And so this is a mushroom, essentially, or the mycelium of the mushroom, if I'm more scientifically correct, that gives the color to this, to any kind of material, really. And so in the 18th century, this was already discovered. It's a mushroom that grows actually on what we now consider to be, quite cheap wood, like pine, for instance. And it was a way for carpenters and different forms of craftsmanship working with woodworkers to add value to their wood. Because if you can make, I don't know, a table or a chair with this bright blue wood, that was considered like a luxury, because it's so special and it's so beautiful. So, and it's recently, it's not an incredibly rare mushroom, because there's also a lot of pines. So if there's a lot of pines, there is like a lot of mushrooms that can colonize these pines. So over time, like from that being used in 18th century furniture and being seen as this kind of luxury form of doing furniture design, it was forgotten again after that for many years. And now what's interesting is that there is a couple of there's several people working with this mushroom, with this material, but the one artist that I also name in my book, she's also in the Future Materials Bank, Lina Kazaka, she's called. She actually has been testing growing this mushroom on textile, because this bright color, if you have that on textile, like it goes, actually, it's not it doesn't stay on the surface like most pigments might be, and you have a natural pigment and you wash your clothes and it will fade. But because this mushroom really enters like the fiber of the material that it's colonizing, that it's growing on, it means that it's very color fast also. So just the idea that you can create like this bright blue color pigment from growing this mushroom on textile, or can also still be used for wood and for carpentry, is an incredible alternative to all sorts of chemical dye or chemical colorants that we tend to use. I mean, the clothes industry is like a very, very toxic industry in itself, polluting lots of water and using lots of chemicals and creating a lot of waste. So rather taking this perspective on sustainability, saying, oh, you cannot do this and you cannot do this, and it's all about what you cannot do, I'm very interested in artists that are showing actually that it's much more beautiful to work with natural colors and dyes, or to work with mycelium instead of plastic. So actually a lot of these alternatives are more beautiful than the toxic versions that we're using. So it's not so much saying, oh, we cannot use the toxic things anymore, also, but it's also saying, look, there's this incredible alternative and it's natural and you can grow it yourself. And something that I find really interesting about growing your materials yourself, like I did with mycelium, or that you can do, if you're using plants for pigments and dyes, or if you're using plants for their roots, to use their roots in your work, or there's all sorts of examples, obviously. But basically what I want to say about it is, if you grow your material, it means that you are spending time with it, because it takes time to grow something. And you get a completely different relationship with the material that you grow than if you just go to a shop and you buy a paint or resin or whatever. So that time that you put into caring for your material, I also believe that love and care somehow is absorbed in the material. So this I think adds also to the artwork, or to whatever you are making with this sustainable material. You have a relationship with that material. You cared for that material, and that's a world of difference than just buying something. There are some amazing natural materials available here, and just the example of bamboo and the paper making from in Mexico we call it kozu, but I think you have a different name here. It's basically the plant or the leaf that you use for paper making, or the oyster shells that you've been using here also in architecture. They're all, I think, really interesting examples of looking at what are your waste streams. I think this is very important to look at also agricultural waste, whether that's maybe rice husk. Rice husk is an incredible substrate for growing mycelium, for instance. So really look, it's not about like importing ideas from the other end of the world and trying to do it here, but I think there is such a rich history in design and in architecture and looking already at sustainable materials that you can build on that knowledge. You don't have to start from scratch. And also understanding what material is already abundantly available. So don't try to do something with something that's already very scarce and it's like hard to find and that makes it expensive. But the example with the oyster shells, for instance, there's lots of them and we eat them and then we throw them away and we consider it trash, but it's an incredible material to work with. Very durable, very strong, very beautiful. I think there's endless examples, but then everyone also has to find their own path, of course. But I would definitely recommend people to browse the Future Materials Bank, just to get inspired, and then take your own path from there and try to collaborate. I think that's also an important one, and particularly collaborate cross-disciplinary like with other disciplines, because often there's so much knowledge in other disciplines, in science, in all sorts of research that we can really learn a lot from, and also these other disciplines can learn from us. So yeah, interdisciplinary collaboration is key.